Okay, so I think that countdown should have went. We're about 2 minutes past 10 a.m. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to From Data Questions to Actions in 10 Minutes. My name is Donny Flynn. I'm a customer data architect here at Census. Previously, I was a head of data at owner.com and Cheaper, where I also spent some time as a machine learning engineer. And I'm a huge Chicago sports fan. So Blackhawks, Cubs, Bears, and Bulls. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I could talk about that for all day. Quick intro to the business. Quick intro to like what's gonna be covered here. The business that we're going to be walking through is called Slides. We're going to dig right into the tables. I'm going to talk about how data questions work in the current flow, in the current state of affairs. Then we're going to go from source tables to the CRM in 10 minutes. That's going to be timed. Now that it's in the CRM, what can you do? In this case, the CRM of choice is Salesforce. And then we're going to quickly summarize what just happened, as well as talk about other use cases of reverse ETL. Quick note on questions, please put them up in the live storm as they come up, and I'll do my best to answer them during that portion at the end. Quick context on Slides. Slides is a presentation software that is used by corporations. It starts with a free tier. Think about it like Google Slides. It starts with a free tier, and while product adoption is really taking off, sales is a little bit slow out of the gates. So when you think about the data architecture that we have, event data is being captured by segment, and that's coming into our data warehouse, which is Snowflake. Additionally, Mongo database is the database that is actually being used by the product of Slides. So data is captured there. Payments info is stored in Stripe. And then the CRM, as I've mentioned, is Salesforce. So all of that data is coming in through ELT, through Fivetran, also being loaded into Snowflake. So this is a fairly common data architecture. When you think about the different tables that we have organizations, so which orgs are actually using Slides, users, so which users are logging in and making slides, which are slides objects, which are called canvas. We also have these user sessions, so that's to be able to tie a user to a session stored on the back end in Mongo. We also have segment login. So when you log in, there's an event that actually tracks that, as well as a page view. Additionally, in terms of payments, that's stored on the Stripe charge object. And then it turns into paid equals true once that payment actually comes through. Here, a quick note on this Stripe charge, you could replace that with subscription and it would work just fine. So the current flow here is Roz is the head of sales here at Slides. She has an exec meeting tomorrow, and she asks, and like many data people know, like, get a quick question. So how many organizations technically should be paying for our product? Now, I've just set up my data stack. I have Snowflake, I have Fivetran, I have all my data. Of course, I can pull that for her. So I go ahead and write that query, organize the organizations, run a quick spot check. Everything looks good, send it over, and I get a quick follow-up question. So Gugu Babysitters, which was an org that I actually checked, and it's on this list, they'd already paid us, so that shouldn't be on the list. But also, Purple Monkeys isn't on this list, and that organization already has 25 users. Even though they didn't meet our business definition of having more than 2 canvases created, they have a high user count. So reasonable for Roz to ask for that, and that's super important that we have that. So adding the canvases created and the active user count. Awesome. So I do that. I write my query. I get that all set up. I make a nice, pretty dashboard, and I share that with the sales team. But unfortunately, because that dashboard isn't actually in the tool that is being used on a day-to-day basis by the sales team, I still get a bunch of Slack questions about which companies, like what is the active user count for this organization, which companies are now need to be paying us, and which companies, how we should prioritize reach outs. And this happens for a number of reasons, but this dashboard actually, unfortunately, doesn't solve the problem of actually turning this analytics into action for this organization. So let's rewind the tape a little bit and think about another path. So let's look at this entity relationship diagram of these tables. And then we have this organization object with the stripe charge, as I had mentioned. We're able to join that like this on the Stripe customer ID. We also have these users that create these canvases and also have their specific session events that come in from segment. And then we have these two segment events that are being logged. If you'll notice here, this is a dotted line from session ID on these segment page views. And that's because sometimes the session ID actually isn't logged properly on the back end for those events. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the tool in which I want to actually use, and that's Hex here. And take a look at the timer. We're here at 12:08. I'm going to round up to 12:09, and I'm going to go ahead and write this query live on, so that we can actually see how quickly it is. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I have the CTEs here and I have what objects I'm going to be joining. But I hope that we can see that this is actually going to be writing a query live, that not super typical of what we would be doing. So please bear with me. So here I'm going to be starting with the charge object from Stripe, and I'm going to do a left join on the organization. And here I want the O.ID as organization ID. This is this for if this Stripe link is out, what is the payment status? So if C.paid, then I already have this data stored. I already have this data typed in Salesforce as a pick list. So I want to make sure that if the Stripe link is out and they've paid, the payment stat has paid is yes. Otherwise, it's link sent and it's not been paid. So that's all coming from the charge object. Now here on this segment events, I want to pull in what the anonymous ID is. A way to think about when you're thinking about or deciphering what that data is coming in from segment, anonymous ID is actually the ID that is tied to the device in segment. So I'm going to pull in the anonymous ID, the session ID, and the timestamp. And I'm going to do a union all between those two different events. Great. Now I have this total events here, and I have this UDA organization ID, the user ID, and the most recent event. So that's going to be coming from the segment events that I can join to user session, and then from user session to user, where that session ID is not null. So if we have that event that's clean, I'm very seamlessly able to join from the session ID to the user session object to the user object and pull the organization. Great, but if for some reason we don't have that session ID, we can still get around that in the data architecture by doing a join on the actual device ID that comes that is stored by segment. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to select the anonymous ID and the session ID from segment events. And I want to group by 1, 2 to pull in the anonymous ID and the session ID here. And I want to do this where the session ID is not null. Great. Now this is my device join, and I'm going to be joining that from this segment events that are coming from here. And I'm going to be joining that on the device in order to get that session ID so that I can do that same join that I had done here. Awesome. So that looks pretty good. That looks like it should work. I'm grouping that by the organization ID, the user ID, and the most recent event. Awesome. Now I want this total events by org. So here you see I have this business logic, which is if that most recent event is greater than, if that most recent event has happened in the last 60 days, that's an active user for us. So I want to make sure that I have that. I also want to do, I want to group this by organization, and then I want to count the distinct number of users that come from, that are tied to this organization that have done any session events in the last 60 days as total user count. Great. Now that one's good. Now what I want to do is count the canvases that have been created by the organization. So here I want to do a u.organization ID, and I want to count a count distinct c.id as canvas created. Awesome, that looks good. And now what I want to do here is I want to pull in everything from this organization. I want to pull in the Stripe link status here. So I'm going to coalesce that payment status with no link sent, because that's the third value of my pick list that I've already configured in Salesforce. I want to coalesce the number of users to 0, just so I don't send any null records over. And then I want to do the exact same thing for canvas created. And then this is actually total user count here, as I had named it up there. Coalesce this like this as canvas created. And I'm going to go ahead and run this query. te.organization. So it wouldn't be live SQL if I didn't have a syntax error on the first try. So I'm going to go te.organization ID and then try that one more time. lo.payment status. So I actually named that has paid instead of payment status. So I'm going to go ahead and go as paid. And there we go. Now we have our query. And now what I can do is just go ahead and copy and paste this into Census. And then we can go ahead and configure this. So here in Census, we can add models here. So I can go ahead and preview this model. But in the interest of time, and because we have about like 4 minutes left, I want to go ahead and just name this slides organization. Awesome. I'm going to save this model, and then I'm going to add a sync for this model and sync this into Salesforce. So add a sync now, slides organization. Great. I'm going to choose where I want to send this data. So I want to send this into Salesforce. I want to send this to the account object. Here, I want to configure how I want to update the destination. So I want to, if that organization already exists, I want to update it, or I want to create that organization if it doesn't exist. Now I want to match the source and destination records. In this case, you can think about it like a SQL join. It's what's the primary ID that you're actually joining on. So I want to join on the company domain. If you'll remember here, so I have the actual website domain for each organization. Awesome. So I have that domain. And then a really nice feature is that you can just do all matching here and then make sure that I have all of the fields that I want. So I'm setting the account name to the account name here. Total active users, has paid, great. Account description, just designating that that's a slides account, and then the canvas created. And that all looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. This is just confirming this. So I'm going to go ahead and run the sync now, create the sync. Now, while that's running, I'm going to quickly walk through just what I have here. So in this report in Salesforce, I have the account name, the domain, number of canvas created, number of total active users, what that payment status is that's coming from Stripe, and then this customer priority field. But wait, I didn't actually add that customer priority field in this query. So what actually happened here is I actually set up a process builder in Salesforce to see, and while I could have done this logic in SQL, I wanted to point out that really, when we think about operational analytics and putting and creating the data in an actionable way that can be leveraged by the organization, the sales team has full visibility and to be able to configure what the rules are from this data coming in. So in this case, it's going to be setting, it's a high priority if these organizations should already be paying. And then that Purple Monkeys organization that had a lot of users but didn't have a link sent and doesn't match the that they should be paying right now is set to medium priority, and the rest are set to low priority. So great, I'm gonna check on that sync. Looks like that all ran. Awesome, so I'm gonna go ahead and run the report. And here you see that we have all of these different organizations with the canvas created. So I can go ahead and sort that like this. I could also group that by customer priority, even add a chart. All things that you can do in terms of slicing and dicing in the tool that you want. So if we just check the time, that was under 10 minutes. So check. And then awesome. So just want to go ahead and jump back into the slides when we think about kind of what else can happen with this. So other use cases for reverse ETL, Customer 360 was basically what we had just walked through in terms of different analytics coming from the data warehouse and being tied to the actual customer record where in the tool that's actually being used by an organization. When you think about personalized messaging, if you want to use the name or if you want to use different facts about customers to create different logics on that in tools like Phrase or Iterable, you can, like companies like Notion and Canva, utilize that. When you think about that process builder and applying rules and processes to how you can actually assign priority, you can do the same thing for tickets in terms of support tickets, and companies like Loom and Bold Penguin utilize that utilize reverse ETL for that. And then additionally, there's a customer success indicators. So if you want to create a SQL query that bins customers in terms of what the churn risk is, or also just being able to better understand what the customer satisfaction is and has been. Companies like Atrium and Culture Amp leverage reverse ETL to do this. So quick summary, we went from source tables and a question about the data to all of that data being at the fingertips of the operational folks at your company. So the moral of the story is don't be afraid to start with reverse ETL. We were able to write a simple SQL query to get some basic analytics. We were able to bring that analytics into a tool that is being used. And when you think about this really frees up your time from answering ad hoc questions that might happen on a day-to-day basis, because you can reuse your hard work. So all of the work that you do in the single source of truth, being your data warehouse in terms of the SQL, that can be applied and be made available to all the different tools that your organization is using, such that you can be more proactive with your time and think about how you can leverage data and how you can leverage analytics to actually get that in the hands of the people that are actually taking actions and reaching out to customers or sourcing customers for you. So the long and the short of it is add reverse ETL to your toolkit when you get a question. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. Now definitely going to open up the question and answer segment of this webinar, and thank you so much. Go ahead and stop sharing. How does Census work with tools like Looker? So a great way to think about how Census works with Looker is kind of question from the audience is that we can use PDTs from Looker to be able to automatically trigger actions or to send that into into like when a PDT builds, we can leverage that data to also kick off a sync and send that into the downstream services that you might want. And when you think about Looker or Tableau, like those are tools that live on top of the data warehouse, and we similarly do, and we're that route, that avenue to where that needs to go. Got another question here from the audience. Do you think that census and reverse ETL will lower the bar for folks like citizen developers to get business information? Um, yes. So we are like absolutely. I think that it lowers the bar, the technical bar, um, to be able to have the human in the loop, to be able to have people not be left out of the data discussion. When you think about census as the spoke from the data warehouse to the operational tools that are being used, these people can, everyone is more involved in the loop when you think about the organization and making sure that that works well. Is there a got another question from the audience here? Is there a way to trigger a sync from a notebook? So if actually, this actually would be a great point to jump back into the screen here and share. So in this sync configuration here, there's a way that you can trigger via API. So you can post to this API to trigger the sync. So from a notebook that's running Python or any coding language, you can send a post to this, and that will kick off the sync. Additionally, what you can do is we've just launched a prefect task. So if you're using an orchestration tool like Prefect, or if you're using an orchestration, or if you're using Airflow, we also have an operator for Airflow, so such that we can plug into those orchestration, and you can really have that nice clean DAG of the data flow. Do I think the Bears will make the playoffs? Kind of getting back to the Chicago sports. Yes, I do. I think the Bears are going to beat. I think the Bears are going to beat the Packers this weekend. It's going to be a big game, and Justin Fields is awesome. Quickly worth flagging. Everyone will get the slides and the recording in your inbox if you've if you have RSVP'd for this event and or have hopped on. All of this will be made available to you. Thank you so much for coming. And I really appreciate you taking the time on this Thursday to hang out with me. Thanks. Go ahead and end the event. Bye.